Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here. Don't forget to subscribe. Today, we are talking about artificial intelligence because it's an unintentional misinformation machine, and I'm looking at the large language models in our lives. Now, I think this is a long-term problem that we're going to have, and quite frankly, we need to fix this. Now, the BBC is the one that broke this in February this month, but there's a really good write-up by Ashley Fields of The Hill that was a lot more concise, so you know where I'm cribbing from. Now, with that BBC report found quote-unquote significant inaccuracies with news summaries generated by the AI engines that you know, ChatGPT by OpenAI, Copilot by Microsoft, Gemini by Google, and Perplexity AI. Say that 5 times fast. I apparently can't. Now, the BBC wrote in its report, and I quote, "The answers produced by the AI assistants contain significant inaccuracies and distorted content from the BBC." Now, the numbers that they have here are absolutely insane per their study. They found 51%, that's right, slightly more than half, of all answers by AI to questions about the news were judged to have significant issues, including a failure to differentiate between fact and opinion. That's always a huge issue, especially when we're training people in things like logic. Now, 19% of the AI answers that cited BBC content introduced factual errors, incorrect factual statements, numbers, and dates. 13% of the quotes sourced from BBC articles were either altered from the original source or not present in the article cited. In other words, just made it up, decided to hallucinate it. Now, Perplexity AI, for example, altered statements from a source quoted in an article, while Copilot from Microsoft used a 2022 article as its sole source for a news summary, in addition to other glaring errors. And to quote the BBC again, "This matters because it is essential that audiences can trust the news to be accurate, whether on TV, radio, digital platforms, or via an AI assistant. It matters because society functions on a shared understanding of facts, and inaccuracy and distortion can lead to real harm. Inaccuracy from AI assistants can easily be amplified when shared on social networks," end quote. Now, they're 100% correct. And this is something that I've talked about quite a bit, where studies have shown that because artificial intelligence is similar to like a Google search result, seems and feels and just has that air of authoritativeness, people tend to believe it even when it's wrong. And we've seen case after case. I've mentioned a ton of them here, on these various segments throughout the last couple of years or so. And so this is a huge issue. Now, if you recall, essentially, the BBC reached out to Apple computers, essentially to talk about this, how their assistant was having these kinds of issues as well, and Apple temporarily shut it down to retool. And so the BBC is hoping to enact change like that by proposing 3 next steps to essentially cope with the global growing industry that is artificial intelligence and large language models. Now enter DeepSeek out of China. Now, those steps include focusing on regular evaluations, holding constructive conversations with AI companies, and increasing regulations for large language models, essentially to ensure inaccuracy. That said, there are political figures out there around the world that essentially have warned about imposing too many regulations on artificial intelligence. So, for example, Vice President Vance of the United States recently attended an artificial intelligence action summit in Paris, France, and argued against excessive regulation. And to quote the vice president, "We believe that excessive regulation of the AI sector could kill a transformative industry just as it's taking off, and I'd like to see that deregulatory flavor making a lot of the conversations this conference." So, end quote. So with that, here's the thing. Because if we're talking about the United States in particular, because I just quoted the vice president, they basically killed, meaning the Trump administration, of which Vice President Vance is part of, killed basically the ethical framework that the Biden administration put around it, and then obviously said $500 billion is going to be invested into the growth of AI. OpenAI, Sam Altman was on stage with the president when that happened. And I think there has to be a balance here, because you can actually have growth in AI in new directions. I mean, obviously there's been conversations, I've done segments on, can we weaponize AI, because it seems like without ethical guardrails and frameworks, and Google just removed their pledge not to do that is coming. But what we're talking about here is accurate information and news delivery. I have done extensive, including my very last segment, which you can go watch, and I highly recommend you do, on disinformation, misinformation, how it spreads, And when the record is corrected, nobody gets the memo. And so when you've got authoritative answers or authoritative sounding answers coming from a large language model like a ChatGPT or Copilot, and then it gets out on social media, that record will not be corrected immediately and people don't get the memo, and that's how this stuff stays pervasive for years. The video that and segment and that I did yesterday on USAID and Politico Pro is exactly an example of that, and I highly go recommend because I literally have the screenshots and the step-by-step process of how that went viral. So I do think that for whatever regulations we're not going to have on artificial intelligence, accurate information availability and distribution and essentially its dissemination of that should be a priority for regulation. In other words, the OpenAIs and Microsofts of the world should be training their artificial intelligences to be as accurate as possible, especially when we're talking about news, because to that point that the BBC made, we all have to agree on the facts, and that is something right now, thanks to misinformation and disinformation, that is incredibly hard. So I'll leave it at that. That is your news of the day, and as always, best of luck to us all. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, where hopefully you'll get nothing but facts from me all the time. Same with YouTube, where you should subscribe. Also Blue Sky and Mastodon. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, please, please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.